Hello, and blessed first Sunday of Lent. I am in my little office on the vigil of the first Sunday of Lent. I went to Mass this morning and I picked up, I absolutely love prayer cards, hopefully based in about 1947. So I got this great Sacred Heart of Jesus. I absolutely love. If I ever were to get a tattoo, which I won't, because I like my body the way it came from the womb. Anyway, yeah, Sacred Heart of Jesus. I got a prayer card. This is lovely. I went to Mass and adoration this morning. This is lovely. There were these three young people, and one of them approached me and said, "Oh, I see you at Mass at the Newman Center all the time. We want to know your name." Anyway, they introduced themselves, and it absolutely filled me with joy. And we had a nice chat, and we all would like to get to know each other better. I mean, I cannot tell you the delight that would bring me. Yeah, just to sort of have some young people, and for any number of reasons. Anyway, couple of random thoughts. One of them is, I have this whole thing about taking a daily walk, and I do a certain amount of kind of stretches, and try to keep in some. I really hate going to the gym, just partly because of the noise, and there's other people there, and people play their music and stuff. So I try to do stuff at home instead. But anyway, this morning I was thinking, unlike like that whole idea that the lover of Christ does the same things every other decent person does, but for an entirely different reason. But I was thinking this morning, I laughed. I said, "Oh, the real reason I want to stay in shape is so that I can kneel. I'll be in shape to genuflect as long as I possibly can." But on the other hand, okay, this is creepy. I just went to Google something, and the autofill. So I type our Sunday. I started to type our Sundays, and the thing fills in exempt from the Lenten sacrifice, which is exactly what I was going to ask. I've been a Catholic since 1986, and I swear for at least 12 years or something, I would have which is nothing wrong with, but I would, whether I was fasting from, I'm talking about a dietary fast, but say from sugar, or a couple years coffee, never again. But anyway, I would do it the whole time from Ash Wednesday to after the Easter Vigil. And at some point, I mentioned it, and all the Catholics in the room were like, "Oh, you're not? Oh, no, you don't do it on Sundays or the Feast of Saint Joseph." They told me all the loopholes. Not that we want to be looking for loopholes, but on the other hand, Sunday is not a day of fasting, it turns out. I mean, there's something so beautiful and human about that. Sundays were made for us, not us for Sunday. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about this whole concept. Speaking of the Lenten fast, though, because one of the first things I did was delete my Twitter app, X. And, if you had asked me, I would have said, "Oh, I very, very rarely comment on Twitter. I have my own account, and I put something up about twice a year. But I read it partly, or so I tell myself, kind of for news almost. It's like a Greek chorus. I mean, the news from every angle seems so slanted and propaganda laden. What is really going on, or what's the alternate view, or something like that. Well, anyway, I'm telling you, I got rid of it, and a whole new world has opened. I mean, even if you don't comment, even if the tone of it is so acrimonious and disrespectful and contemptuous, for one thing, but also just the time waste. It's like, okay, another high school or state or whatever said biological males cannot compete in women's or girls' sports. Yay! Okay, but do I need to read it 50 times. Like, what, you could get that information in a half a second. So it's really, even in even in the 4 days, I see, wow, how, controlled or just how nefarious it all is. It's not like the powers that be have my best interest or the higher good in mind. It's, of course, it's all geared toward getting clicks and captivating you in the wrong way. Anyway, so meanwhile, I'm also I've probably mentioned, really studying the rule of Saint Benedict and down to the order of the Psalms and just kind of a way closer look than I had taken before. So one of the things I'm doing is Benedict, as you may know, had his monks memorize all 150 Psalms, which to us seems, or to me, seems like a massive, massive, almost insurmountable feat. Some of them are really long, people. But just from this, I probably mentioned it last week, this practice of sort of, as I pray the office each day, I'm writing down the first line of each psalm. I have this notebook, and now I'm copying out the psalms one by one. I think I'm on Psalm 26, so it's going to take me a good long time. But there is something so nourishing and life-giving and alive about that whole exercise. And so the Psalms are coming alive for me in this way that I just find remarkable. And I feel like St. Ignatius of Loyola, the story about how he was laid up. He was a soldier and he was laid up with a wound in his leg, and there was nothing to read except the Gospels. He wanted to read his romance novels. He wanted to read his ex, right, and his gossip sheet. And all he had was the Gospels, and or maybe it was religious books. Anyway, the point is he had this realization that the way he felt when he read heroic stories of heroic kind of Christian deeds or stories of Christ was a totally different feeling than he got when he read the lighter, sort of more frivolous stuff. And I feel like that is what is happening to me. It's really interesting. And also the whole Benedictine life, monastic life, it's work, prayer, work, and reading. So, I've always been a huge reader, but I find my reading is now tends more toward just, kind of spiritual reading or just meatier type of subjects that have suddenly become way more compelling to me than ever before. Also, apropos of memorization, and it was not too long ago, I remember my own father, who was born in 1921, God rest his soul, he would go about the house. He didn't go to college. He had just been to a public school in Danvers, Massachusetts, and he would go about reciting these great A.E. Housman poems and John Masefield, must go down to the sea again. Longfellow. Because they had them memorize when he was a student, just an elementary school student, had them memorize poems. I think there's something so deep there. And I'm thinking too of Father Chisek, servant of God, Father Walter Chisek, who, another, as you know, if you have listened to these at all, one of my huge heroes. When he was in solitary confinement in the Stalinist prisons and then in hard labor for, I think, 15 years. But when he was in solitary, in particular, he would try to call up as best he could the words of the Mass. He did his examination of conscience. He said the Angelus. And I think just knowing, even apart from the Psalms, but knowing some of our great treasury of Catholic prayer. If you listen or participate at all with Sing the Hours, it's a great podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on I'm sure it's on Spotify. But Paul Rose, this guy from Massachusetts, from Cambridge, I think. Who sings the morning and evening prayer every single day, and Compline you can get as well. But from that I've memorized the Lord's Prayer in Latin, and the Salve Regina in Latin, and the Glory Be in Latin. And there's something, the Memorare, there's just so many, daily offering, the Divine Praises that we say after to conclude adoration. And then you have them in your heart, and you can just call them up when you're in traffic, or when you're standing in line, or when you're waiting at the dentist's office. And but anyway, yeah, Father Walter would, insofar as possible, right, try to remember the words of the Mass. And then when he got out and was in the prison, the labor camp, he had some fellow priests, and so they would say the clandestine Mass together, and for the other men. So how useful would that be? They don't have access to books. Can you imagine? But they knew the word. They knew enough of the office, I guess, to be able to say it and to know the words. I remember one time I met Father Ted Hesburgh, is that his name? I think, at Notre Dame. I didn't even know who he was. He was like this huge figure, and this friend of mine took me to meet him. And this is kind of tangential, but he just told, he's a great storyteller, a total raconteur, but he told about being, for whatever reason, he was in some remote island, Fiji or something, and I think for a while he'd been assigned there or something, and maybe 2 people would come to Mass or something like that, and someone said to him once, why do you even bother? There's no one there to, who are you saying the Mass for? Or maybe no one came sometimes, and yeah, who are you saying the Mass for? And Father Hesburgh said, the whole bloody world. So I love that. And that is who we're praying for, and who we memorize prayer for. We're always praying for the whole bloody world. Yeah, so I think, and the other thing is, I've also been reading a bunch of pieces lately about how the internet, I think we sense this anyway, is being sort of in real time sort of scrubbed. So suddenly all these, or not so suddenly or gradually, links disappear, and original documents disappear. I mean original documents from 10, 20 years ago, already wiped out, news stories. So the internet, on which we've been depending now for, not that long in historical time, but for us, a good long time, a good chunk of time. Yeah, it's just being selectively eradicated, which to me, I have always hated reading books online. I do not have a Kindle. Once in a great while I'll buy a Kindle book if it's the only way I can get it, or rent, or take an ebook out of the library, but I absolutely can't stand reading a book online. And now, ever more, I'm like, get a real book. Get a real book, and but the point is, right. And then I thought, okay, so all this stuff is just being scrubbed, things are being removed, and I thought of heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. What happens when all the books are gone? Not to be weird and dystopian, but we see what is happening, and it's not toward, let's have this beautiful shared repository of truth and what really went down in history or what went down 5, 10, 20 years ago, someone or some force decides what we're allowed to remember, sort of. So, yeah, Matthew 24, verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, my words will not pass away. Therefore, it behooves me to know as many of those words as I possibly can. I mean, it's almost like history, right, is coming full circle. So the realer you want to remain or be, the more... And again, not to be a Luddite or anti-technology or anything like that, but at the same time, I think that like writing things out is another way. Yeah, pen to paper. It's a different exercise than typing, obviously. So anyway, this is what we get to do with our time that's freed up, perhaps, by sort of letting go of a thing or two that stands in the way of our relationship with Christ, which is really what we're going to be sort of evaluated on. I'm going to post, apropos of which, I'm going to post a couple of links to the good Father Donald Haggerty gave a men's Lenten retreat. I'm not even sure when, maybe a few years ago, but there's a part 1 and part 2. They're about half an hour. They're just great. I mean, he's hardcore, he lays it out, and yet there's not a scolding at all tone. He tells he's a great storyteller in this kind of very understated way. He tells these stories that stick in your mind, and he kind of lays it out, and then he'll tell a story, and you can kind of do with the story what you will. Anyway, I want to post those, and and the other thing is that I see how this setting things aside that maybe don't serve us, it opens the way. Isn't it interesting that these young people who I see all the time at Mass, I've seen them for 3-4 years, almost, maybe 3-4 times a week at Mass. It's their Newman Center, it's the University of Arizona. Obviously there's a huge age gap, but isn't it interesting that, and I'm always shy about approaching them because I think, oh, please don't bother the children, they're. So I'm not saying it's like I'm not saying they've been standoffish. We probably both have to some extent. But the point is, isn't it interesting that this morning of all mornings, Mass, adoration, copying out the psalm, that the young woman is drawn to say hello. I don't think these things are coincidences. And even if we never spoke again, there's been a moment of communion there. That certainly nourished me for the day, and made me know I'm not alone. And so anyway, and then here's the last thing. And the other thing that I've heard is, prayer coupled with sacrifice. Like prayer comes fairly naturally to me, and so does being alone and being silent and sitting still. Often super, super distracted. If I'm in kind of the right, frame of being, it comes fairly easily. It's not a super stretch, but sacrifice, depending on what the sacrifice is. Prayer itself is some form of sacrifice, but yeah, it's like, that's where you kind of think, even something super simple. I'm not going to have half and half in my coffee. It's interesting, depending on what our attachments are. Anyway, the point is, one of my, what I think of my few, which I'm sure is I'm deluding myself, but, sort of distractions, if you will, is tennis. I love women's tennis. I played sports in high school, and I used to play tennis myself. And I just love women's tennis, and I've followed it fairly closely for years and years, so I know all the, I know the players, and I have my heroes and my ones who I can't stand, and what harm? Come on. But I noticed Indian Wells is on for those who are tennis fans. It's a 1,000 tournament. It's a pretty big tournament, one step down from a Grand Slam, and Indian Wells is almost considered okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is, I have a dear friend who's really struggling with an addiction, and he even asked me to pray for him. He's not a religious guy. And at Mass, at Adoration this morning, I was like, maybe we could just delete the WTA app too. It's like I'm like crying. I mean, it was like, I just thought, oh, come on, but yesterday I went to see this one match, and I saw like how many times I looked at my phone just to see if the match was on yet, because it was a men's match. You get it. And I just thought, okay, maybe I could give this up. Let's just set it aside for Lent. You can reevaluate at the end, and maybe I won't want to or need to, but a little sacrifice to be in solidarity with my friend. So I think that's like Lent, right? And Christ says that. I don't even want, in a way he says, I don't even really care about your fasting, in the sense of like, oh, I'm not going to eat chocolate. I'm not so sure chocolate stands in the way of me and God. I think it paves the way. But anyway, he says, I want you to let your neighbor off the hook. I want you to like share with people. So I think anything that brings us tears of joy, I think are always very close to the truth. Like, oh, we've hit upon something that is close to the heart, to this, like the bleeding heart of Christ with the can you see? I just love it. Crowned with thorns, flame coming out of it. Anyway, that is it. Let's memorize just really everything that is, or memorize maybe even just a couple prayers or one psalm would be a beautiful thing for Lent. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. My brain is really, it's another thing. I have a zillion ideas all of a sudden, so my brain is firing too, which is in a good way. So anyway, thank you so much.